And nothing better than starting from the beginning, right? So, for those who don't know, or are unfamiliar, and we're also being broadcast live right now. So, for anyone who doesn't know, my name is Michael Vass, or Michael Vasquez. We're actually the same person, we're here both. Michael Vass is the name I took on when I was a stockbroker back in the late 90s. It is a legal federal alias. You ever see that box whenever you're filling out forms for the government? It says alias. Yeah, I'm the actual person they wrote that. They have that box for. I actually have to fill that in. So if you hear Michael Vass, you hear Michael Vasquez, same person, doesn't matter. And if you're wondering why did I do that, because as a stockbroker I got tired of being called Velez, Velasquez, and every other name you can possibly imagine instead of Vasquez. And that's tough. Now, what we're going to talk about today is the Second Amendment, red flags, gun control, but really, it's much bigger. What we're going to be talking about today is American freedom, American rights, and the consequences of restricting those freedoms and those rights. And I think it's a very important issue because it affects every aspect of our lives in many, many ways, and will do so for decades to come. First, before I even get to that, let's take a trip through my life. Back in about 1996, 1997, I was a stockbroker, as I mentioned. And I was coming home from the office one day from Manhattan. I lived in the Bronx where my family grew up and where I'm originally from. And in the 90s, if you've ever been around the Bronx, it was a troubling time. Lots of crack, lots of drugs, lots of problems, gangs. And as I was coming home, in my suit, in my briefcase, I had a gentleman stop me. Just walking past me, stopped me, turned me around, and he pointed the gun right in my chest. He was about this far away from me. He was high on crack. And his answer was, I want you to understand that I could kill you. He had my attention. Luckily, he wanted to make a point. And he just wanted to make that conversation. What was going through his mind at that moment as he was high on crack, I have no idea. But we had a conversation. It lasted about 20 minutes. Something very important to understand about someone who has a gun pointed at you. He didn't shake. He wasn't nervous. This wasn't the first time he's pulled a gun on someone, and it wasn't the first time that he was going to shoot them. He didn't point at my head. This was in a movie. He pointed it squarely in the center of my chest. He understood. He was going to kill me if I did something. That's an important moment. I'll give you another moment. Here in Binghamton, I'm a homeowner, business owner. I've owned my house now for 11, 12 years. And I'm about 3 years into owning the house. Had some friends over. One was a pregnant woman. We're staying over at my house. It's Saturday morning, 4 a.m. There's a massive banging on my door. Don't know what's going on. Woke everyone up. Well, the banging went to someone breaking down my door and entering my house. Screaming, shouting, knocking some stuff over. Rampaging. I get my friends over, protect the woman who's pregnant, get everyone into a room, call the police, prepare to defend myself. I have one final door between this person who just figured out from all the noise upstairs and hearing the lights come on. There are people in the house. And he's coming. And I got everyone into one room, have an access point to get outside onto the roof down. You got police coming, and I'm at the door barricading it, and she's trying to break down the door. That's a very important moment. Now, I do want to give props to the Binghamton Police Force. I had 8 police cars show up like that. They were there within about 2.5, 3 minutes, maximum, which felt extremely longer than that in my life at that moment. And this door is buckling, and I had this one thought. At any moment, this guy's going to break seriously deranged. Well, wound up, the police came, ran out the house, ran into my neighbor's house, broke into their house, and was sitting on their couch when the police came and got him. High on PCP. Many people today will tend to tell you that I was a victim of gun violence. I'm here to tell you right now, no, I wasn't. He was on. Well, I wasn't a victim of gun violence, I was even a victim of violence. The gun that the crackhead had, that wasn't having any malice against me. It wasn't trying to shoot me. It didn't have a point to give to me. The man, the crackhead, did. The guy on the PCP broke into my house. The weapon he had with him, the weapon didn't have any malice against me. It didn't care. He did, in his deranged mind. I was a victim of people with malintent, individuals that were looking to possibly kill me. When you hear someone say, you're a victim of gun violence, no. Throw that out. When you hear that on the news, throw that out. You are not. No one is. You're a victim of criminals and deranged people and people with malintent. That is a major difference in when we hear it. Because the weapon they're using, whether it's their hand, a brick, a gun, a knife, doesn't make a difference. It's the person that has that. I can stab you with a fork knife, a fork, a knife, a spoon. Are they incredibly deadly weapons that need to be banned from all human beings? No. They're utensils we use to eat. The difference is the person who's wielding that, instead of trying to eat their breakfast, they're trying to stab you or harm you. There's the difference. And we need to understand that as a society, because the problem isn't a gun or a firearm. It's not a knife or a brick. It's actually the person who's wielding that and the intent that person has at that moment. If we're going to talk about the Second Amendment, we're going to talk about rights, we're going to talk about anything, we have to understand that it is the person and their intent that is the first thing that we have to talk about. If we're going to talk about trying to resolve things and fix things, we have to talk about the person that is doing something wrong. We start and end the conversation there. Everything else is an accessory. It's ancillary. It's a distraction. It's a way to confuse the issue and make you make a decision that you wouldn't normally make otherwise, because you're not thinking about what the real problem is. And you'll never get a solution if you're not dealing with the root of the problem and you're only dealing with the cosmetic issues. So that's an important thing I want to get out. I mean, you don't hear that a lot in a lot of conversations talking about Second Amendment and everything else. No one really looks at it that way. And we should. Because it starts in the beginning, it starts, the middle, the end, all of it is right there. But we also throw out some numbers here, so that we have a good scope and understanding. Because very often we hear, it sounds like, oh my God, the world's just going to hell in a handbasket. Guns are the worst thing that could possibly happen, and it's just destroying the nation. Let's really understand what we're talking about here. There are approximately 330 million people in the United States at this time. Approximately 157 to 160 million of those people own handguns. That is every other person. Half the nation, at least, owns firearms. In fact, based on the estimate, there's about 357 million guns, firearms in the United States. Every other person in America owns 3 firearms, on average. That means if you don't own a firearm, the person next to you probably does. Whether it's for their self-protection, for their home, their work, whatever it may be. Guess what? The guns aren't killing everyone. Because if they were, we'd already all be dead. There are more guns than there are people, and there are more than enough people to kill everyone without a gun. So let's throw out this premise that the gun is absolutely dangerous. Because it's not. It is inherently. Now, again, it comes back to who is the person and what intent do they have. Now, whether or not I own a firearm in my home doesn't really matter. What does matter is if I do, or even if I don't, you're not in my house. If you are in my house and you've been invited in, you still wouldn't know. You don't need to. It doesn't matter. My intent is not to harm you. And most of your neighbors would say the same thing. But if you happen to be on PCP or maybe not, and you break into my home, why wouldn't I defend myself? Would it make a difference if I defend myself with a sword? Would it make a difference if I use a broomstick? Does it make a difference how I defend my home? Does anyone have a right to come into my home and start evaluating every object I have that could potentially be a weapon and then decide, hey, I'm going to take those away from you? Some people may notice, and you can go to YouTube, back in December of 2012, just prior to the New York SAFE Act being passed, I went through a selection of items that could be in anybody's home. A shotgun, screwdriver, steak knives were among the items that I pointed out. Oh, and a hammer. Guess what? In the United States, people die because of rifles, hammers, steak knives, and screwdrivers. If you don't believe me, look up the FBI's Crime in the USA data, which I look at on a regular basis. Did you know that in Connecticut, 2016, you were 12 times more likely to be killed by someone with a knife than with a rifle? You know why? 0 people were killed in Connecticut in 2016 with a rifle. 0 people were killed in Connecticut in 2015 with a rifle. 0 people were killed in Connecticut with a rifle in 2014. But people were killed with knives, hands, guns, hammers. People died. So is this issue serious? Yes, it is. Are we seriously talking about it? No, we're not. Not at all. What we're seriously talking about is what some people believe and want you to emotionally feel to get a political outcome they want. That's the truth of almost all the conversations about guns and gun control. And this is not a speech. I was going to write a speech, but I decided, you know what, let's have a discussion instead. Because I can give you the stats. I've been doing this for 12 years. I check the gun control, all the numbers on firearms, deaths, every year. I write at least 2, 3 articles. I do at least 1 or 2 speeches every year on the updated numbers. And people fall asleep. Because the numbers are boring. But you know what? The discussion is. And that's why I want to discuss this with you. So if I jump a little bit, please excuse me, but that's how conversations are, right? When we look at what we're hearing about this, there's 3 things that we really need to look at when we talk about gun control. First thing is, who's doing it? How are they doing it? What can we do? Essentially, those are the 3 questions. And the first thing you want to hear one thing every time. There's actually 2 conversations that happen every time there is an incident. And in particular, the incident that happened yesterday. And I am sorry to give my condolences to the family of the woman who died in Pacoa, California, because that was a horrible thing. Mind you, that wasn't a mass shooting. A mass shooting requires 4 people to be injured. 3. So it's technically not a mass shooting. The problem is, depending on the medium, it's a mass shooting, it's everything and anything that will get a headline and draw people's eyeballs to it. But my point is, what we're seeing in the conversation is always these 2 things. Oh my God, that incident happened. Let's take away every gun in the universe. Or the other side is, oh my God, something happened. I need to be more protected. I need a fire. Both of those arguments actually are valid. They're also both flawed. But one thing is very true. In the United States, We have an intrinsic, immutable right that is given by God to us to own property. That is a fact. It may be reinterpreted, it may be modified, it may be restricted, but we start with the first thing first. Why do we have that right? Because without that right, you have no other right whatsoever. Without the right to defend ourselves from any source that is a danger to us, we have no freedom. Ever. Let me put it in context. Many people may be aware. I lived in Moscow back in '91. And if you remember what was happening back then, there was a coup. It was a very scary time. There were a lot of people arguing against the government. I was down at the Russian White House, Kudusevsky Street, with hundreds of other Russians and some other expatriates standing out, and we were against the coup attempt that was happening. The government decided to bring in tanks, rolling down the street against us. And I remember the thing that was said at that moment. If you're not serious, get out of here. The tanks are on their way. Can you imagine for a moment? I'm a former Marine. I've been around tanks, I've been around guns all my life while I was in the service. Can you imagine what it feels like to see a full-on Russian tank rolling down the street, 3 others behind it, coming straight to you? A weapon that takes out buildings. It's meant to take out other tanks. That is meant to mow down people who are fully armored. And you're just standing there like this. You know what's one of the biggest differences in that moment than any moment in America? We can arm ourselves. The government can't just have a coup, wake up in the morning on the radio, we have a new government, and then roll tanks down the middle of the street. Because in America, we can go and get our arms. We can defend ourselves. One of the biggest problems that Yamamoto mentioned before Japan attacked America in World War II, we should never attack the American mainland, because there will be a rifle behind every blade of grass. One of the biggest reasons why America has remained America for over 200 years is every nation in the world is absolutely terrified by the fact that we defend ourselves from the government and from everyone else. And you can't just walk in and take us over, though many nations would like to. These are important things to understand when we're talking about the Second Amendment and its restrictions. Because without this understanding, all it is the government said you can have something. And if the government tells you you can have it, they can tell you you can take it. They can take it away. That difference is important. Because the government can't take something that is intrinsically and inherently mine unless I give them the right to do so. And we have done that 22,000 times. A lot of people don't realize this. There are 22,000, actually over 22,000 gun control laws in America, and have been for most of the existence of America. We also have great laws. Murder is illegal. So when you understand that, something should come across everyone's mind. We have 22,000 ways of saying, don't use a firearm to hurt someone. And if you kill them, you will be punished by law. Why do we need more laws? It's an important question, and it never gets asked. Is the 22,001 law that gets passed, that's going to suddenly stop people from misusing a tool? I don't think so. I don't think the criminals are thinking that. I don't think the deranged think that. There's no reason to believe that we're going to be any safer with 22,001 laws than we were at 19,999 laws. The fact that we have murder and we now define it as murder with a weapon doesn't change the fact that it's still murder. What it does mean is that we have to really evaluate what are we looking to do and what are the consequences of what we're doing. The 1934 National Firearms Act, over 60 years ago, or 80 years ago, was passed. And it said, we don't have a right to have a machine gun. We don't have a right to a sawed-off shotgun. We don't have a right to make a bomb. And the nation agreed on that. It was passed by Congress, and I have yet to hear anyone ever say, yes, the average person should be able to go out and make a bomb. And I don't think anyone will ever make that argument, because you shouldn't. There's no practical use for that. That's not the kind of argument we're hearing today. When we listen to laws like red flag laws, what we're hearing is not something that is very specific for the protection of the public. What we hear is a political agenda to take control away from people and their lives. Let me explain what I mean by that. The red flag law right now is in 15 states. It is being considered in the Senate and in the House of Representatives as a national legislation. Red flag laws, very simple, and the simplest way to explain it. Somebody is upset and thinks you're dangerous. And because they think that, they go to a court, the court issues a warrant, and police, or law enforcement, take all firearms that you own. You then go back to the court after the fact and try and get your property back, if you're not dangerous. That's it in a nutshell. What I have just described is a violation of your First, Second, Fourth, Fifth, 15th, 8th, and amendments and due process. I'll say it again. Red flag laws violate your First, your Second, your Fourth, your Fifth, your 8th, your 15th amendments and due process. And no one's willing to tell you that. No one is willing to stand up and say, this is what's going to happen to you. Plus, by the way, several other consequences. And the really big kicker to it all, you're not going to be a day safer. You're not going to be any safer. You're not going to protect anyone. You're just going to have less freedom. So let's run through it real quick. First Amendment. Well, red flag law is initiated because someone saw something about you they did not like. That means they can see a tweet, they can see a Facebook post, they can see something on social media. It could be a conversation that you had. It could be a conversation that your kid had with the teacher. This is enough to initiate, both on the federal level and in most of the states, a red flag complaint. They then go to the courts and start that whole process. Second, you've never committed a crime. Red flags are not based on crime. You will never commit a crime if you are having a red flag action put against you. No crime has ever been done. But they take your property. And they take your inherent right to a firearm that shall not be infringed, and yet it is. So it violates your second. Your Fourth Amendment, invasion of privacy. They're coming into your home. They're going to take every firearm in that home. They're going to search that entire home for every firearm that is there. Fifth Amendment, which is also part of due process with the 15th Amendment. You don't get to see your accuser. The accuser will go into a courtroom without ever telling you about it and make a complaint. And a judge will make a decision without you ever knowing about in most of these laws, you don't get anyone to represent you in that courtroom. And no one has actually ever spoken to you. This is all happening without your knowledge. You have no due process. You don't get to defend yourself until after you have been punished. That's not due process. Eighth Amendment. It is cruel and unusual to punish someone for something that is not a crime. I see a lot of people here are wearing blue jeans today. Guess what? How about we say that everybody who wears blue jeans has to pay the government $50? Is anyone for that? Not that you committed a crime, not that it's a bad thing to do, but because you're doing it, we're going to punish you. I don't know anyone who would say yes to that. What's the difference? There is no difference. It is cruel and unusual to take away someone's property, to destroy their reputation in their community, to possibly affect their job, to cause them to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to get back their property without ever once committing a crime. That is insane. And there is no other aspect of life in America or anywhere where I can understand or anyone has ever tried to explain that we should punish you, but you never did anything wrong. That's just a quick summary of this. But there's another consequence that's built into the red flag law. A lot of people don't realize this because, again, it's never spoken about. And if you're wondering, by the way, I've done roughly about a year of research on this. I've already published an 8,000-page paper on this. I have over 200 sources on this, on red flags in every state that they have existed so far and are proposed. One of the consequences that happens in every single state is that if you have children in the household where a red flag is going on, the state must take your children. The state will take your kids. How's that? That's not in the law. You're right, it's not in the law. Every single state in the United States has Child Protective Services. In New York State, it's called CPS. Right? There is a mandate that if the police are coming to a home, they must notify Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services is required by the state that if a child is in a home that is dangerous, they have to take the kids out. If you are a danger to yourself and your community such that the government has to suspend your right to the Second Amendment and take away your property, that home is too dangerous for a child to be in. The state must take your kids. You are now fighting to get back your property and to get back your kids. You never committed a crime. Hey, we're doing good. Does anyone feel safer? At all? By the way, please tell me which criminal is being stopped by this. Is the crackhead who pulled the gun on me being stopped by a red flag law? No, you're going to say, Mike, well, see, that's not it. It's mass shootings. We're going to stop the mass shootings. We are? We're all in New York here. People who are watching this may not be familiar with New York, but there's a city called Islamburg, New York. It was recently, 3 weeks ago, it was in the news. Didn't stay in the news, but it was. And you know why? Does anyone remember? There was a bomb plot. 4 kids under the age of 20 had decided that they were going to go to Islamburg with a bunch of guns and a bunch of bombs and kill everyone in Islamburg. They were stopped. They weren't stopped by the red flag laws of New York State. They weren't stopped by most of the 22,000 laws that exist against gun control. They were stopped because a kid told one of his classmates that they were going to go to Islamabad and kill him. That kid went to the teacher went to the police investigated, and they stopped it all. Guess what? We already have the system in place to protect you from mass shootings. You open up your mouth, someone talks about it, goes to the legal system, law enforcement. There you go. We don't need the law, but we have it. The plot in Islamabad could not be stopped by a red flag law. None of the kids had anything suspicious on their Facebook. None of their teachers had any idea that they were planning to do this. There is absolutely nothing that would have triggered it. By the way, the 4 boys were Boy Scouts. 2 of them were Eagle Scouts. They're not on anyone's monitor list. No one had any clue. Red flag would not work. By definition, it fails. It doesn't protect anyone. The New York Safe Act failed. It didn't protect anyone. It's not designed to. You're not being made safer by these additional laws. Not when 4 kids can build bombs, which are illegal, by the way. You can't even get that legally. So they've already violated the law. They already made the decision to kill people. Attempted murder. They're breaking the law. Is the additional laws making anyone safer? No, because we're not dealing with the root cause. What would cause 4 kids to decide that they're going to go out and kill someone? Matter of fact, this is the answer. This is the real question we should ask about any mass shooting. What is it that makes someone decide that the only option they have is to go out and kill a bunch of innocent people? There's your problem. And that's not going to be resolved by a law. I don't care what law it is. If you're not dealing with that, you're not going to make anyone safer. But yet we have a red flag law in place. And the consequences of that law mean that you can speak less freely unless you will be prosecuted. It means that every teacher is now a member of law enforcement. In fact, they are spies. And they must notify the courts of every single incident they could possibly even hint at being something that could be leading to a problem in the family and a red flag. Otherwise, they are legally liable, as well as the school district. There is no judge that's going to deny a red flag legislation for fear of making that one time that they are wrong and a mass shooting happens. They will be legally liable, they will lose their position, and judges love their position, and they will be ostracized within their community. Police will follow the law because that's what they do. They enforce the law, even when the laws are bad. Well, most of them. And so they're doing their job, and maybe they're protecting people. I mean, that's what they're hoping that they're doing. Families will be separated. Do you know in Connecticut, Indiana, when I spoke to their child protective services, actually I spoke to several people in the government of Connecticut and Indiana with FOIA requests. Nobody has any idea how many kids have been taken because of the red flag laws. Thousands of people have been affected by this. Hundreds per year. But no one has any idea. Because they don't keep that record. That record isn't available for the public. So we don't even know what the cost is. We don't know if people can get their kids back. In the places that have had red flag laws longer than anyone else ever. This is a secret that has been kept from you. No one discusses this. No one is talking about this. Because they're too busy saying, you're going to be safe. This law will make you safe. That's the number one thing we hear over and over again. And it is the number one thing that has failed. 22,000 times before we have said, you will be safe. Just give us the government. Give the government power. Lose a little bit more of your freedom. And you will be safe. And yet, year after year, that isn't the truth. And people lie. because I know you've heard about it. December of 2018, CNN and the rest of the major media. There has never been more gun deaths in America than in 2018. We hit brand new highs, 40-year, I think it was 40-year highs. Guess what? That's a lie. It's actually not a lie. It's carefully wording the argument. Because look, were there 40,000 people who died in America? 44,000 actually, who died because of a firearm? Yes. 24,000 of them killed themselves. We have a problem with suicide. 24,000 people killed themselves with a firearm. Another 14,000, I believe it was, killed themselves with other things, knives, cars, everything else. We have a suicide problem. And that has gone higher and higher year by year. Number of people who died other than that. Take out the gang violence, gangs shooting at each other, you lose another 5,000. Roughly about 6,000 people died because of guns outside of gangs and drugs or suicide. That is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent. We don't have a gun violence problem. We have a problem with people and their intent. If we actually look at it, it always comes back to that. And every other discussion is just a distraction, taking away the rights and the freedoms without regard to the real problem. So I said a lot of things, and I know I want to also do a Q&A here. But I want to give a very clear understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about red flags, when we talk about gun control, when we're talking about, or we're hearing from our politicians trying to tell us that they're going to do something for us without thinking about what is the consequence of what they're doing. What is the effectiveness of what they are doing? Just because they say they're here to do something great doesn't mean they are. And it is our responsibility to protect our rights from the government. That's why the Second Amendment exists. It has an inherent understanding that government, left to itself, will become corrupt. Government, when left to itself, will send tanks down the street to beat people into submission. And the thing that stops that from happening is from us standing up for ourselves, for our inherent, immutable rights, and saying, no, you can't do that. One final thing before I start the Q&A here. I know a lot of people will listen to this and they go, well, Mike, then you think everyone should have a gun? No, I don't. I don't think everyone should have a nuclear bomb. I don't think everyone should have a weapon of mass destruction. I don't even think that everyone should have a firearm. And my reason for that is some things are dangerous. Some things we can agree to. I don't think someone on PCP should have a gun. No. I don't believe that people who have mind-altering drugs such that they cannot conceive of reality should have access to a firearm. That's inherently dangerous. I do believe in saying, hey, this person is massively depressed. They are crying out for help. Maybe we should do something to try and limit their access to that firearm and harm themselves or others. I do believe we need to make sure that we change the thought process in kids who are the main sources of these mass shootings from the only option I have is to kill hundreds, dozens of innocent people. Do I think a firearm is dangerous? No. Someone may have a firearm right now. Someone may have a knife right now. You can have a spear for all I know. And I don't care. Because the intent isn't to try and harm me. If it was, more than enough people have pens, you have cell phones, you have car keys. If you want to hurt me, you can. Whether or not it's a firearm doesn't really matter. So I don't care. I do care when the intent to harm is there, and that's what we need to address. We don't need gun control. We need to address the problem that causes gun control. It is a symptom. And the more we focus on the symptom, the worse the problem gets. But let me start taking some questions, because I'm sure I've raised a few questions with what I've said so far.